So welcome to episode 4, Objection Prevention, and why the best sales closers hardly ever hear objections. If you've watched episodes 1, 2 and 3, you'll already be seeing sales conversations very differently. You'll understand that better leads matter. You'll understand that the why is what drives decisions. And you'll understand that when people hesitate, it's usually because of one of 5 things. No money, no need, no desire, no trust, or no hurry. Now, episode 4 is where selling stops feeling difficult because I'm going to tie it back to episode 3. This is the episode that explains why the best closers don't spend their lives just handling objections. They prevent them from arising in the first place. And that might sound like semantics, but it's not. Hopefully, by the time I've explained everything, this will become crystal clear. Now, most salespeople wait for objections to happen and then they react. But professional closers build conversations in a way where objections never really fully form. And once you see how that works, you can stop bracing yourself for resistance and start leading conversations with confidence. So, here's the truth. An objection is almost never a surprise, or it shouldn't be a surprise to you. It's something that's been quietly building in the homeowner's head whilst the conversation's taking place. And you should be preempting it. They don't suddenly decide they don't trust you. They don't suddenly decide it's too expensive. They don't suddenly decide they're not in a hurry. They don't suddenly decide that they don't need it or don't desire it. Those thoughts were already in the background, already there. They just haven't been addressed. And that's where objection prevention comes in from you. Objection prevention is simply this. You deal with the concerns before the homeowner feels the need to voice them. Does that make sense? Not by talking more, not by overselling, but by setting the conversation up properly from the start. Most objections exist because expectations were never set. The homeowner doesn't know how the process works. They don't know what decisions they need to make, and they don't know what's normal. And they don't know what's realistic. And that's why you need to manage their expectations. So their brain fills, without that knowledge, their brain fills the gaps. And it's usually in a negative way. And that's why pre-framing the conversation matters so much. Pre-framing isn't a script. It's closing with leadership. It's you calmly explaining how the process works, what most people worry about, and what typically happens as next steps. And when you do that nice and early, you remove the uncertainty from the conversation. And uncertainty is where the objections lie and fester silently. For example, you as a closer know price is pretty much always going to be a concern. So you don't wait until the quote lands to deal with it. You prepare the ground in advance. You help them to understand what drives cost. So you add value by introducing what makes projects vary and why cheap solutions often cause bigger problems down the road. Not in a defensive way, but not in an unapologetic way, just as a matter of fact. Now, when the price comes up, It becomes familiar, they're ready for it, and it's not a shock. You also know that trust could be an issue. So you don't wait for them to ask for reassurance. You build credibility naturally and early. You reference experience. You reference how jobs are managed. You talk about aftercare. You explain what happens if something does go wrong. And that removes the fear before it has a chance to turn into doubt. You know urgency could be weak. You don't pressure them later on at the close. You help them to explore what happens if nothing changes. But not in a dramatic way, but in a real way. How long's this been bothering you? What does it stop you doing? How does it make you feel? What happens if you're still dealing with this same issue next winter or next year? Now that's not pressure. That's just adding clarity. And clarity kills objections. Here's where most people go wrong. They think an objection is a no. They think objection prevention means controlling the conversation. It doesn't. It means guiding the conversation. You're not forcing outcomes. You're removing friction in a gentle way. The friction is where hesitation is created. Most objections are born from assumptions, unanswered questions, uncertainty, from your lack of cohesion and confidence. When you lead the conversation confidently, those gaps simply disappear. And here's the big mindset shift that I want you to take from this episode today. Objections don't come from what you say, they come from what you leave unsaid. Objections don't come from what you say, they come from what you leave unsaid. That one line explains almost every stalled sale. If the homeowner's confused, they hesitate. If they're unsure, they delay. If they don't feel safe, they'll look elsewhere. But when you address the concerns before they surface, something interesting happens. The conversation feels calm. The homeowner relaxes. They ask better questions. The conversation becomes easier. And they lean in instead of pulling back. And that's why experienced closers seem so unflappable. They're not better talkers. They're better listeners, better anticipators. They've had the same conversation hundreds of times. They know what worries people, and they know where doubt sneaks in. And they calmly deal with it before it becomes a problem. Now, that's not manipulation. That's professionalism. This is also why handling objections at the end of a conversation often feels difficult, awkward. By the time the objection's voiced, it's already hardened in your prospect's mind. So prevention is softer, it's cleaner, it's more respectful. Now, once you understand objection prevention, something else becomes obvious. When objections are prevented properly, closing stops feeling like a separate event. It just becomes the natural progression to the next step, which brings us perfectly to episode 5. Because in episode 5, we're going to talk about how to overcome objections when they do appear, and they will. without being pushy, without discounting, and without damaging the trust that you've built. Not every objection can be prevented, but every objection can be handled calmly. And when you know what it really means to handle an objection, it becomes very safe. So join me in episode 5, where we cover overcoming objections with confidence.